The sun was just beginning to cast its first golden rays over the rugged hills as she pulled her worn coat tighter around her shoulders. The dirt road stretched ahead, dusty and lonely, winding toward a distant ranch that promised work and, she hoped, anonymity. After months of running from a past that refused to stay buried, she had no desire for friendship, for explanations, or for pity. She only wanted a place where she could disappear into the rhythm of daily labor and silence. The ranch came into view like a mirage, nestled between rolling hills, its fences sturdy and its fields stretching wide under the open sky. A wooden sign creaked in the wind, bearing the name Silver Creek Ranch. But the letters were faded, worn by years of sun and storms. As she approached the main house, she noticed its simplicity. Yet there was something almost regal about it, the way the structure stood strong against the landscape. She took a deep breath, trying to steady the nerves that fluttered in her chest. A man emerged from the shadows of the barn, a figure broad-shouldered and silent, his hat pulled low over his eyes. There was an air of quiet authority about him, a presence that commanded attention without effort. "You here for work?" he asked, his voice low but steady. She nodded, offering a faint smile. "Yes, ma'am," she said, though it sounded strange, even to her own ears. He studied her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "All right, you can start tomorrow. Meet me in the barn at sunrise." With that, he turned and walked back toward the barn, leaving her alone in the dusty yard. She exhaled slowly, the first trace of relief mingling with apprehension. Something about the man made her wary, yet there was no denying the kindness in his eyes, however fleeting it had been. She felt a pang of curiosity, the kind that made her glance around, taking in the property. The ranch was larger than she expected. Horses grazed in wide pastures, their glossy coats shining in the morning light. A small orchard and vegetable patch hinted at careful planning and self-sufficiency. Despite its isolation, the place felt alive, as though every element had a purpose. That evening, she explored the modest guest quarters she would occupy. A simple bed, a small table, and a window looking out over the hills, enough to keep her grounded, enough to remind her why she had come here in the first place, to escape. She unpacked the few belongings she had brought, folding them neatly as if her past could be contained just as easily. And yet, as her fingers brushed against the worn edges of her belongings, memories pressed in. Old mistakes, faces she had hoped to forget, and the sense of betrayal that had driven her across countless miles. Dinner was simple, brought to her door in a small tray. She ate in silence, listening to the creak of the house settling, the low whistle of the wind through the trees, and the distant clip-clop of hooves in the paddock. There was a rhythm to the ranch, she realized, one that offered both comfort and routine. Here, work was clear and tangible. There were tasks, responsibilities, and hours that stretched wide with purpose. She could lose herself in it, if she let herself. Before sleep claimed her, she wandered to the edge of the property, where the first stars blinked faintly against the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, the cowboy worked, the shadows of his figure moving with practiced ease. She had no idea who he truly was, what he had endured, or what secrets he kept tucked away behind his calm exterior. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope, a quiet belief that perhaps, in this remote stretch of land, she could find not just work, but safety, and maybe even something resembling peace. Tomorrow would bring hard labor, the sweat and grit of ranch life, and the beginning of a journey that might change everything. As she lay down to sleep, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a promise she wasn't yet ready to name, but one she felt deep in her bones. The first light of dawn crept over the hills as she trudged toward the barn, the chill of the morning brushing against her cheeks. The air smelled of hay, horses, and earth, a scent so foreign to her city-bred senses that it made her chest tighten in both awe and anxiety. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, greeted by the familiar creak of the wood beneath her. Boots. The cowboy was already there, silhouetted against the rising sun, moving with quiet precision as he checked the tack and stirred the morning feed. "Ready to get started?" he asked without looking up. She nodded, forcing confidence into her voice, though every fiber of her body trembled with nervous energy. "Yes, sir," she said. He finally glanced at her, his eyes measuring, assessing, and then, just for a heartbeat, softened. "Good. You'll learn fast if you keep your head and pay attention." The morning was a blur of new experiences. She fed the horses, mucked out stalls, and helped herd cattle into the pen. Every task was physically demanding, and her muscles ached in ways they hadn't for years. But there was a strange satisfaction in the tangible results of her work. Sweat ran down her back as she lifted hay bales, and the scent of straw mixed with the faint aroma of leather and horse made her feel oddly at home. All the while, she couldn't help but notice the cowboy. He moved with a calm authority, each motion deliberate and practiced. Yet there was something about him that unsettled her, a certain tension beneath the composed exterior, as if he carried invisible burdens. Occasionally, his gaze lingered on the horizon, distant and contemplative, and she wondered what memories haunted that rugged face. Lunch was quiet. They ate under the shade of an old oak tree, the cowboy handing her a simple sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "Don't ask about the house or the ranch's history," he said casually, though the tone carried weight. "Just work and learn your place here." She nodded, curiosity prickling at the edges of her mind. Something about the insistence on privacy only fueled her questions. As the day wore on, she began to notice little inconsistencies, small luxuries tucked among the simplicity of ranch life. There were expensive saddles, rare breeds of horses, and a set of finely crafted tools that seemed out of place in such a remote location. She asked herself who could afford such things, and why they would hide it. Yet the cowboy remained silent, giving nothing away. By late afternoon, her hands were calloused, her shirt damp with sweat, and a strange pride swelled in her chest. She had survived the day, not just survived, but kept pace with the demands of ranch life. The cowboy nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and she thought she saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. Curiosity finally got the better of her. While stacking firewood near the barn, she noticed a small side door, slightly ajar, leading to what appeared to be a storage room. Peeking inside, she glimpsed the gleam of polished wood and metal, carefully organized and clearly valuable. The sight made her heart skip. Who was this man, she wondered, who lived so simply yet kept such treasures hidden away? Before she could dwell too long on her discovery, the cowboy's voice called from across the yard. "That's enough for today. Finish feeding the horses, then wash up before supper." His tone was firm but not harsh, and she knew better than to disobey. She shut the door quietly, the image of the hidden treasures etched in her mind. That night, as she lay in the small guest room, she replayed the day's events over and over. The work was hard, yes, but it was honest, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of purpose. And yet she couldn't shake the mystery of the cowboy and his hidden wealth. Who was he, really? Why had he chosen this isolated life, and why had he chosen her to work alongside him? As sleep approached, she realized that for the first time in years, she didn't just feel exhausted, she felt alive. The ranch was more than a refuge. It was a world full of secrets, challenges, and possibilities. And somewhere in that vast, sunlit landscape, a man with a guarded heart held a fortune, and perhaps unknowingly, the key to her new beginning. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would learn more. Not just about the ranch, but about the man who had brought her here, and the life that might finally be hers. The next morning, the sun rose slowly, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She trudged toward the barn, feeling both anticipation and unease. The work was becoming familiar, though her muscles still ached in places she hadn't known existed. There was comfort in the routine, yet curiosity gnawed at her relentlessly, especially about the cowboy. He was already in the barn when she arrived, methodically checking the horses. His movements were smooth, almost hypnotic, and she couldn't help but watch. There was a quiet strength in him, a calm confidence that contrasted sharply with her own restless energy. She caught glimpses of a scar along his jaw, faint lines at the corners of his eyes, and a certain heaviness in his shoulders. Whatever his past, it had left its mark. "Morning," she said softly, trying not to sound breathless. He glanced at her briefly, a small nod, the only acknowledgement before returning to his work. She knew better than to ask questions now. Observation, patience, and quiet diligence were her new allies. The day unfolded with a series of tasks that tested her endurance and focus. She helped repair a broken fence, carefully measured feed rations, and even attempted to shoe a stubborn horse under his watchful gaze. Each success earned her a curt nod, each mistake a subtle correction, but never scorn. Slowly she began to understand the rhythm of the ranch, the unspoken language of its daily life. Yet, despite the hard work, her attention kept drifting to the little inconsistencies she had noticed the day before. The tools in the storage room were too fine, too expensive for ordinary ranch work. She had glimpsed a glint of gold or polished metal that didn't belong in a simple barn. Why hide such things here, in the middle of nowhere? And why had the cowboy been so careful to keep her from discovering them? During a break, she ventured near the main house, ostensibly to fetch water. Her eyes roamed over the property, catching small details that seemed out of place. Intricate carvings on the front door, heavy curtains that blocked any view inside, and the faint outline of a safe partially concealed behind a tapestry in one window. Her pulse quickened, not just with curiosity, but with the thrill of realizing she might be uncovering a hidden world within this isolated place. As the day waned, the cowboy finally spoke, breaking the silence that had persisted since dawn. "You've got a knack for this," he said, voice low and steady. "Most people give up before they get this far. Stick with it, and you'll learn everything there is to know about ranch work." There was no arrogance in his words, only the quiet assurance of experience. Her chest swelled with a mixture of pride and something else, something softer, harder to define. Evening descended quickly, and she found herself washing the day's sweat and grime from her hands, reflecting on everything she had seen. There was no denying it. The ranch, the work, and the cowboy himself held secrets. And yet, she felt drawn to this life more strongly than she had ever felt drawn to anywhere else. Each task, each glance, each small interaction seemed charged with unspoken meaning. As darkness fell, she lingered near the barn, listening to the soft nickering of horses and the rustle of the wind through the trees. The cowboy emerged, carrying a lantern, and for the first time, he looked at her with more than passing acknowledgement. His gaze was steady, weighing her with quiet curiosity, as if trying to determine how much of her could be trusted. She felt an unspoken understanding pass between them, neither revealing everything, but both sensing the beginnings of a connection deeper than words could express. Later, as she lay in the guest room, sleep came reluctantly. Her mind raced with questions about the hidden treasures, the guarded behavior of the cowboy, and the unspoken bond growing between them. Yet beneath the questions, there was a growing certainty. She was no longer running from the past. She was stepping into something new. A life filled with hard work, secrets, and possibilities she had never imagined. For the first time in a long while, she felt alive in a way that scared her. The ranch was more than a refuge. It was a place where mysteries waited to be uncovered, where trust could be earned, and where she might finally belong. And somewhere, Deep in the quiet strength of the cowboy lay a fortune she could only begin to guess at, and perhaps a man who could teach her that some secrets were worth discovering together. The next morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of day where the sun's warmth barely chased away the lingering chill of dawn. She rose early, eager to return to the rhythm of ranch life, but a subtle tension hummed beneath the familiar tasks. Something had shifted overnight, an unspoken awareness that the quiet routines were masking more than they revealed. She joined the cowboy in the barn, helping him sort feed and check the horses. His movements were precise, almost ceremonial, and she found herself studying him more closely. There was a meticulousness to his work, a care that went beyond simple maintenance. He polished saddles, inspected tools, and checked the fences with an intensity that suggested he expected intrusions, though from whom, she couldn't guess. Curiosity, as always, tugged at her. While carrying a stack of hay to the stalls, she noticed a small trapdoor beneath the loft. It was cleverly concealed beneath the floorboards, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Her heart quickened at the discovery. Could this be part of the secret he was hiding? She forced herself to remain calm, reminding herself that prying too much could ruin the fragile trust they had begun to build. By mid-morning, she was learning not just the physical labor of ranching, but the subtle art of observing. She noticed the cowboy's routines, the way he checked certain gates more often than others, the careful way he handled his horse saddles, and the brief, almost imperceptible glances he cast toward the hills surrounding the property. Something valuable was being protected, she realized. Something worth guarding with vigilance. Lunch brought another quiet moment under the oak tree. She ate slowly, careful not to let her curiosity show, yet her mind raced. Every detail she had observed so far hinted at wealth far beyond what a typical rancher could amass, but the man himself gave no indication of pride or arrogance. He simply existed, strong and self-contained, a mystery wrapped in silent strength. After lunch, she was tasked with repairing a section of fencing near the northern pasture. As she worked, she glanced toward the main house and caught sight of the cowboy moving purposefully toward the storage room she had glimpsed days before. Her pulse quickened. He carried a heavy, sealed crate, moving with an ease that suggested familiarity. She wondered again what secrets lay hidden behind those locked doors and why he felt the need to hide them so carefully. The afternoon brought an unexpected interruption. A rider appeared on the distant trail, a man from the neighboring valley, with a reputation for prying into other people's affairs. He rode confidently, but there was a sharpness in his eyes, the kind that promised trouble. The cowboy noticed him immediately, his posture shifting from relaxed authority to alert tension. "Stay here," he instructed quietly, and she obeyed, heart pounding in her chest. From her vantage point, she watched the exchange. Words were few, gestures precise, but the tension was palpable. She could sense the undercurrent of threat. The intruder was probing for information, and the cowboy, with his calm authority, was deflecting it skillfully. The man eventually rode away, but the unease lingered like a shadow across the ranch. She realized then that the cowboy's secrecy wasn't just eccentricity, it was necessity. Something valuable was at stake, and outsiders could not be trusted. When he returned to the barn, he said nothing about the encounter. But she noticed the tightness in his jaw, the way his eyes flicked toward the hidden doors and crates with careful calculation. Later, as she washed the sweat and dust from her hands, she understood the subtle lesson of the day. Trust was earned slowly, vigilance was required constantly, and the life she had stepped into was far more complex than she had imagined. That night, as she lay in the quiet guest room, she reflected on everything she had seen. The ranch was more than labor. It was a world of secrets and protection, of hidden treasures and careful alliances. The cowboy's silence was not indifference. It was the shield of someone guarding something precious. And somewhere within that guarded life, a bond was forming. Between them, fragile but undeniable, built on shared work, mutual respect, and the unspoken promise of trust. As sleep claimed her, she felt a growing certainty. She was no longer just a worker or a wanderer. She was part of this world now, entwined with its secrets and its possibilities. And whatever fortune the cowboy was hiding, she sensed that discovering it and understanding him would change everything. The morning sun spilled over the horizon, painting the hills in a soft amber glow, but the warmth did little to ease the tension that had settled in her chest. After the rider's visit the previous day, she couldn't shake the sense that the ranch was more than just a place to work. It was a sanctuary under constant threat. Yet even with the lingering unease, she felt a determination she hadn't known in years. She was here to stay, and she would prove herself capable. She met the cowboy in the barn as usual. His eyes lingered on her longer than they had before, a subtle acknowledgement of her growing competence. "You handled yourself well yesterday," he said, his voice low, almost wary. She offered a small smile, a mixture of pride and relief. His rare praise was a gift she didn't take lightly. The day's work was grueling, mending fences along the northern boundary, checking water troughs, and guiding the herd across the pastures. Yet beneath the physical labor, she felt herself growing more attuned to the ranch's rhythms and to the cowboy's presence. Each glance, each word, each shared silence began to carry meaning. He was a man of few words, yet his actions spoke volumes. There was care in the way he tended the horses, vigilance in the way he surveyed the property, and, though subtle, trust in the way he allowed her to assist him. During a brief rest by the creek, she finally let herself ask the question that had haunted her since her arrival. "Why do you keep so much hidden?" she ventured, her voice barely above the sound of flowing water. He stiffened, a shadow passing over his face. "Not everything belongs to the world," he said finally. "Some things are meant to be protected, not shown." His eyes held hers, unyielding yet unreadable. She sensed he wasn't lying, but neither was he revealing the full truth. Her curiosity was now tinged with admiration. She had expected a cold, reclusive man, but she was beginning to see a depth she hadn't anticipated. There was a reason. He guarded his secrets so fiercely, and part of her wanted to earn the right to know them. Yet another part of her feared that knowing too much might destroy the fragile bond growing between them. The afternoon brought an unexpected complication. While rounding up cattle near the eastern field, she spotted a figure slipping through the trees at the edge of the property. Her heart leapt. Another intruder. She froze, unsure whether to confront or flee, and the figure froze as well, noticing her. Panic and adrenaline surged through her, but before she could react, the cowboy appeared, moving with swift, decisive grace. In a few measured steps, he intercepted the intruder, his presence commanding and immediate. "Leave now," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. The man hesitated, then retreated into the shadows, disappearing as suddenly as he had appeared. She exhaled shakily, her pulse still racing. The cowboy turned to her, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "You must be careful," he said. "Curiosity is good, but awareness is essential. There are people who would take advantage if given the chance." The encounter left a mark on both of them. As they led the remaining cattle back to the barn, she realized that the cowboy's secrecy wasn't mere eccentricity. It was survival. And in that realization, a subtle trust began to cement between them. She was no longer just an observer. She was a participant in the protection of something precious, a role that demanded courage, discretion, and loyalty. That evening, as she cleaned the barn and prepared for the night, she noticed the quiet moments when the cowboy allowed himself to relax slightly in her presence, a small smile, a glance that lingered a fraction longer than usual. She understood that trust was being extended, cautiously but deliberately, and that her actions had earned it. Lying in the guest room that night, her mind swirled with thoughts of the day, the intruders, the hidden treasures, and the man she had slowly begun to care for occupied every corner of her thoughts. She understood now that this was no ordinary job, and no ordinary life awaited her here. This was a world of secrets, challenges, and unexpected connections, a place where she could confront her past, prove her strength, and perhaps even discover a future worth staying for. And somewhere in the quiet strength of the cowboy, she sensed not just a hidden fortune, but a heart that, like hers, was cautiously learning to trust, and perhaps to hope. The sun rose slowly over Silver Creek Ranch, casting long shadows across the pasture and illuminating the dust that danced in the morning light. She moved through her morning chores with a quiet focus, yet her thoughts kept returning to the previous day's intrusion. The cowboy's words echoed in her mind. Curiosity is good, but awareness is essential. She understood now that her place on the ranch wasn't just about work. It was about trust, vigilance, and respect for boundaries she had yet to fully comprehend. He appeared at the barn, carrying a stack of tools, his movements calm and deliberate. For the first time, he didn't just nod at her or give a brief instruction. He paused, watching her as she adjusted the harness on a restless horse. "You're improving faster than I expected," he said quietly, his voice carrying the faintest note of approval. She felt a warmth bloom in her chest, a rare acknowledgement of her efforts. "Thank you," she replied softly, her voice carrying more sincerity than she intended. The morning passed in a rhythm both exhausting and strangely comforting. She fed the horses, repaired fences, and helped mend a torn tarp over the storage area. As she worked, she noticed the cowboy's attention was divided, not from her, but from some concern he had kept hidden before. Occasionally he glanced toward the hills with a subtle tension in his posture, the kind that spoke of secrets heavy with responsibility. Finally, during a quiet break near the creek, he motioned for her to join him. "There's something you should know," he began, his tone serious, but not harsh. Her heart skipped at the words. She braced herself, unsure whether this was a test, a confession, or something else entirely. He told her a fragment of his story, enough to satisfy her curiosity but not reveal all. Years ago he had inherited a fortune, property, and valuables that were targeted by unscrupulous people. The isolation of Silver Creek Ranch was his shield, keeping the wealth safe and the people he cared about protected. "It's not just money," he explained, his gaze distant. "It's safety, legacy, and responsibility. That's why I live this way, and why I guard it carefully." She listened, absorbing every word. For the first time, the hidden glimmer of gold and polished wood she had glimpsed in the barn made sense. This was a man who bore a weight far greater than she had imagined, someone whose silence was not pride, but protection. "I understand," she said quietly, feeling the gravity of his words settle over her. And though he didn't ask, she felt the unspoken question: could she be trusted with this knowledge? The afternoon brought more work, but now the tasks carried a new meaning. Each fence mended, each horse groomed, was part of a larger effort to preserve the sanctuary the cowboy had built. And in her heart, she began to feel a responsibility, not just to the ranch, but to him, to the trust he had begun to extend. As the sun dipped low, painting the hills in shades of gold and violet, a distant rider appeared once more. This time, the intruder lingered, circling the perimeter of the property. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't panic. She knew what needed to be done. She went to the barn, alerting the cowboy with a calm efficiency born from the lessons of the past days. Together, they watched the figure, tension coiling between them, silent and watchful. That night, after the intruder had left and the ranch had settled into quiet, she found herself lying in her room, staring at the ceiling. The cowboy's words, his trust, and the glimpse of his burden weighed heavily on her mind. She realized that she was no longer just a worker on a ranch. She was part of a delicate balance, a secret world of wealth, danger, and responsibility. And in that realization, a connection had begun to form between them, a bond forged through work, trust, and shared understanding. As sleep finally claimed her, she knew one thing for certain. Her past might have driven her to Silver Creek Ranch, but it was the man who guarded the fortune and the trust he had begun to place in her that would shape her future. She was learning that some secrets were not meant to isolate, but to protect, and that the heart of the cowboy held more than just gold. It held the possibility of something she had thought she would never find again: safety, trust, and perhaps even love. The morning broke with an unusual stillness, as if the ranch itself sensed the tension in the air. She rose before dawn, moving quietly through the guest quarters. The previous day's intrusions had left a mark, not fear, but a sharpened awareness. Every sound, every shadow, every movement beyond the fences felt significant now. She understood that the world outside Silver Creek Ranch was not benign, and that the cowboy's caution was more than habit. It was survival. As she approached the barn, she found him already at work, meticulously checking the gates and inspecting the horses. His eyes flicked toward her, a subtle nod acknowledging her presence and her growing skill. She smiled faintly, feeling a quiet pride. She was no longer the timid, uncertain newcomer. She had learned the rhythms of the ranch, the patterns of work, and the silent language of trust that governed life there. Their morning chores progressed with practiced efficiency, yet her attention kept straying to the perimeter of the property. And then she saw it, a shadow moving deliberately beyond the tree line, closer than before. Her pulse quickened, a mix of anticipation and instinctive caution surging through her. "He's back," she murmured, her voice low but urgent. The cowboy's jaw tightened, and without a word, he gestured for her to stay close and follow his lead. Together, they approached the northern fence, moving with the precision of seasoned strategists. The intruder had grown bolder, no longer content with distant observation. He lurked near the edge of the woods, attempting to gauge the ranch's defenses, testing for weakness. The cowboy's expression hardened, a combination of resolve and protective determination. "We can't let him see any vulnerability," he said quietly. "Not now. Not ever." They set a careful trap, guiding the cattle subtly while maintaining concealment. She followed his instructions flawlessly, her confidence growing with each step. For the first time, she realized that she was not merely assisting, she was a partner in protecting the ranch and the fortune it safeguarded. Every action mattered, every decision carried weight, and the intruder's boldness only reinforced the stakes. By midday, the intruder attempted a direct approach, stepping into the open, with the hope of intimidation. The cowboy intercepted him with calm authority, his presence commanding and unyielding. "Leave now," he said, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken consequences. The man hesitated, calculating, and then slowly retreated, disappearing, once more into the shadows. The relief was palpable, yet fleeting. They both knew this was only a temporary reprieve. Later, as they repaired a section of the fence damaged by recent storms, the cowboy finally allowed himself to share more of his story. He revealed fragments of his past struggles, the reasons for hiding his wealth, and the heavy responsibility he carried. She listened intently, absorbing each word. The fortune was not just material. It represented legacy, trust, and the safety of those he cared about. And in that moment, she realized that she was no longer just a bystander. She was part of that trust, part of the responsibility, and part of the secret he guarded so fiercely. The evening descended quietly, yet the day's tension lingered like a shadow across the ranch. They shared a sparse meal, but the silence between them was comfortable, filled with understanding rather than emptiness. She sensed that their bond had deepened, built on shared danger, mutual respect, and the acknowledgement of hidden truths. As night fell, she lay in her room, reflecting on the events of the day. She had faced the first real test of her courage, witnessed the stakes of the cowboy's secret, and discovered the depth of her own strength. The ranch was no longer just a refuge from her past. It was a proving ground for her resilience, her loyalty, and her heart. In the quiet darkness, she realized something profound. The hidden fortune was more than wealth. It was the catalyst for trust, for partnership, and for love. And she knew, with certainty, that whatever challenges lay ahead, she and the cowboy would face them together, stronger for the bond they had forged amidst the trials of Silver Creek Ranch. The dawn broke bright and clear over Silver Creek Ranch. The hills bathed in a warm, golden light that seemed to promise a new beginning. She rose early, as was her habit now, moving with ease and confidence through the familiar rhythms of the morning. Today, however, there was an undercurrent of tension that set her senses on edge. The intruder who had haunted their perimeter for days would make his final move, and she could feel it in every rustle of the trees and every distant bird call. She met the cowboy in the barn, the quiet authority in his gaze sharpened by resolve. "Today it ends," he said simply. She nodded, her heart steady despite the lingering thrill of anticipation. This was no longer just about work or curiosity. It was about defending the life they had both built, the trust that had grown between them, and the secret he had entrusted her to protect. The morning passed in a tense blend of preparation and vigilance. They secured the horses, reinforced the fences, and ensured that every approach to the property was monitored. She moved beside him like a shadow, watching, listening, anticipating. The lessons of the past days had honed her instincts, and she realized with quiet pride that she had become indispensable, not just as a worker, but as a partner in the preservation of their sanctuary. By midday, the intruder appeared, bolder than ever. He stepped into the clearing, a challenge in his stance, but there was no room for hesitation. The cowboy stepped forward, his posture calm yet commanding. "Leave now, or face consequences," he warned. The man laughed, a bitter, nervous sound, but before he could advance, she stepped forward, her voice firm and unwavering. "You won't touch this place," she said, surprising even herself with the certainty in her tone. The intruder hesitated, sensing the unwavering resolve in both of them. In a few swift, decisive movements, the cowboy disarmed him, forcing him back toward the tree line. She moved with confidence, her actions precise, supporting him in ways that felt instinctive. Together, they cornered the intruder, leaving him. No option but retreat. Finally, he disappeared into the distance, leaving the ranch safe once more. Relief washed over them both, tempered by the awareness that vigilance would always be necessary, but they had proven they could face threats together. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the pasture, they returned to the barn. There was a quiet satisfaction in the air, a sense that a significant chapter had closed. The cowboy finally allowed himself a rare smile, one that reached his eyes and softened the lines of tension around his mouth. She felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride, admiration, and something far deeper, a connection that had grown through shared trials, trust, and mutual respect. Later, by the edge of the creek, he finally spoke of the fortune that had been the center of so much secrecy. He shared not every detail, but enough to ease her curiosity and acknowledge the trust between them. "It's not just wealth," he said. "It's a life carefully protected. And now, you're part of it." She felt the weight and honor of his words, realizing that she had not only found refuge but a role of importance, a place where her courage, loyalty, and heart mattered. The evening settled into a calm embrace, the stars reflecting in the water as they walked side by side. No words were necessary. Their bond had become unspoken, understood in every glance, every gesture, every quiet moment of shared silence. She realized then that the true treasure was not the fortune, but the trust, companionship, and love that had grown between them. As night fell over Silver Creek Ranch, she lay in her room, the events of the day and the weeks past settling into her memory like a promise fulfilled. The intruder was gone, the fortune secure, and the man she had come to care for stood not just as a guardian of wealth, but as a partner in life. For the first time in years, she felt complete, not defined by her past, but by the strength, love, and possibilities she had found in this remote, sunlit corner of the world. And somewhere deep in the quiet strength of the cowboy, she knew that together they could face anything, protect what mattered most, and build a future full of hope, trust, and the promise of a life reclaimed. The dawn broke in soft, rosy light, and the ranch hummed with the quiet energy of another day. She moved through the chores with practiced efficiency, each task feeling less like labor and more like a rhythm she could sink into. The past weeks had transformed her. Muscles hardened, confidence grew, and the restless ache in her chest began to ease. Yet even amid the familiarity, her mind kept returning to the cowboy and the secrets he guarded so carefully. He appeared in the barn just as she was adjusting the saddle on a particularly spirited horse. "You've got a touch with them," he said quietly, a rare hint of warmth in his voice. She glanced up, catching the brief flicker of a smile that softened his usually stern features. Her heart skipped, and for a moment she felt an unfamiliar vulnerability. She was drawn to him, not just by curiosity or admiration, but by something deeper, a connection that transcended words. The morning passed in a series of routine tasks, but with an undercurrent of closeness. They worked side by side in silence at times, the unspoken rhythm of companionship settling between them. She noticed small details she had never before. The way his hands moved with deliberate care, the slight tension in his jaw when he was focused, and the rare moments when he allowed himself a laugh that seemed to echo across the open fields. During a break, she ventured a personal question, her voice tentative. "Why do you trust me here?" He paused, considering her, the weight of his gaze making her feel exposed, yet safe. "Because you've proven yourself," he said finally. "Not just with the work, but with discretion, patience, and respect. That counts for more than anything else." She felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of pride and something far more tender, a growing sense of belonging. By mid-afternoon, their routine was interrupted by another sighting on the outskirts of the property. A stranger, watching from a distance. Her pulse quickened, but this time she didn't panic. She had learned to observe, to anticipate, to act. "It's him again," she whispered. The cowboy's eyes narrowed, and together they moved strategically to safeguard the ranch. It was no longer a simple job. It was a shared mission, one that required trust and teamwork. The intruder retreated once more, leaving them in tense silence. The cowboy's hand brushed hers briefly as he returned to the barn, a fleeting touch charged with unspoken meaning. She felt the shift, something subtle but undeniable. Their bond had moved beyond professional respect. It was rooted in shared experience, in the silent understanding that they were protecting not just property, but each other. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the ranch settled into quiet, he invited her to walk with him along the edge of the fields. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of grass and earth. He spoke little, but his presence was comforting, grounding her in a way she hadn't experienced in years. She realized that she no longer feared the past as she had before. Here, with him, she could breathe, she could belong. At the edge of the creek, they stopped, watching the water catch the last light of day. For the first time, he allowed himself to share a memory, a fragment of his past, the hardships that had shaped him, and the burden of guarding the fortune that had dictated his life for so long. She listened intently, absorbing every word, her own past and pain reflected in the quiet understanding between them. When they finally returned to the barn, she felt a sense of closeness she could no longer ignore. Trust had been earned, respect established, and an unspoken affection had begun to bloom. The cowboy's secret fortune was still hidden, but the greater treasure, she realized, was the bond they were forging, a connection built on shared struggles, understanding, and a tentative, fragile hope. That night, lying in her guest room, she felt the weight of the day settle over her. The ranch was more than a refuge. It was a place of growth, discovery, and trust. And in the quiet strength of the cowboy, she sensed something more profound than wealth or secrecy. The possibility of a future shared, a life rebuilt, and a love slowly awakening in the most unexpected of places. The morning air was crisp with the scent of dew, and the ranch stirred to life with the low murmur of animals and the gentle creak of wood. She rose early, anticipation mingling with unease. The intruder from the previous days had not been seen since, but she felt the tension lingering like a shadow over Silver Creek Ranch. Every glance toward the distant hills reminded her that their sanctuary was fragile, and the cowboy's careful watchfulness had become a constant presence in her life. They worked together in the barn, the rhythm of their labor almost seamless now. She handled the horses with confidence, repaired, fencing with skill, and followed his subtle directions with intuition she hadn't known she possessed. He moved beside her like a shadow, silent but vigilant, eyes scanning every corner of the property. There was trust in his actions now, not just his trust in her ability, but in her judgment, in her presence. Around midday, as they checked the northern fence line, she noticed movement at the far edge of the pasture. A figure was crouched near the tree line, watching them carefully. Her pulse quickened. This time the threat was closer, more deliberate. "It's him," she whispered, pointing subtly. The cowboy's jaw tightened, and he nodded. "Stay close," he instructed. "Keep your eyes open, but don't draw attention." Together, they moved strategically, guiding the herd to the southern fields while keeping the intruder under observation. She realized then that the work on the ranch was no longer just physical, it was tactical. She had to think, anticipate, and act quickly. Her training over the past weeks, her growing bond with the cowboy, and her innate resourcefulness came together in a way that surprised even her. The intruder, realizing they were aware, retreated, but not entirely. He lingered near the tree line, watching and waiting for an opening. The cowboy, noticing the hesitation, motioned for her to follow. Him toward the barn. They moved silently, using the natural cover of the terrain. He explained, in low, measured tones, the importance of remaining calm and strategic. "Some people will test boundaries," he said. "It's not about fear, it's about control." She absorbed every word, feeling her confidence grow alongside her understanding of the stakes. By late afternoon, the tension eased slightly, though she knew it was only temporary. They returned to the barn, the horses settled, the fences repaired, and the intruder gone, for now. Yet the day had changed something between them. In the quiet moments, as they cleaned the barn together, there was a sense of partnership that had deepened beyond words. She understood the responsibility he carried, and he in turn had begun to trust her judgment, her courage, and her loyalty. That evening, as they shared a sparse meal beneath the fading light, she noticed the subtle ways he allowed her presence into his personal space. An unguarded glance, a relaxed posture, a small but meaningful smile. Their bond was no longer just built on work or necessity. It had evolved into something deeper, a silent understanding forged through shared danger and trust. After supper, they walked along the edge of the pasture, the sky painted with the first stars of night. She felt the tension of the day melt into a quiet awareness of their connection. "You've grown strong," he said quietly, his voice carrying both approval and something gentler, admiration perhaps. She smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the day's labor. "I had a good teacher," she replied softly, and for a moment their eyes met, and the world seemed to shrink to the quiet expanse of the ranch and the trust they shared. That night, lying in her guest room, she realized that the stakes were higher than ever. The hidden fortune, the intruders, and the cowboy's guarded life were all intertwined with her own growth and courage. She no longer saw herself as just a worker seeking refuge. She was part of a fragile, yet unbreakable bond. And somewhere, in that trust, that shared vigilance, she sensed the possibility of something more profound: love, loyalty, and a future shaped not by the shadows of the past, but by the choices they made together.